I'm out of things to say that have not already been said. A new low point reached for the Pacers. The short-handed Hornets coming to Indy and knock the Pacers to 10-15. What is going on with this inconsistent team? I don't know. They don't know. We'll try to figure it out today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Monday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name is Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, Friday night, Pacers in Chicago rehash their offense, score 132 points, look great, points in the paint, threes are going in. Okay, there's the Pacers from last year. Sunday night, they welcome the Hornets to Indy. The Hornets are on a back-to-back, and the Pacers score 109, only led by a maximum of 2 points. Looked awful for much of the game. Their entire starting five was junk, and they lose to the Hornets again. Second time this season, fourth time in the last 2 seasons, 11th time in the last 15 meetings with the Charlotte Hornets, who are apparently the Pacers' kryptonite. A new low point reached in a season full of lows for the Indiana Pacers, who can't get out of their own way, who are playing very inconsistent, and wasted a star-level performance. Yes, I'll say it. Star level from TJ McConnell. This entire episode should be started with me 15 minutes of how TJ McConnell carved up the poor Charlotte Hornets. Because he did. We'll get to him. Unfortunately, it's going to be the last 10 minutes of the podcast and not the first 15, because we have to talk about where the Pacers are. And I just did this, so I feel stupid doing it again. But right after the Nets game, they're 9-14. Oof. Terrible road trip. 90 points. What is this? And I ran through the historic relevance of being 9-14 and what 9 wins in a 23-game stretch really means, and why it's so rare for teams to lose that frequently when they're trying to win. And just, it's weird that was the reality. And the teams they're losing to were not good. And then 4 days later, they had an even worse loss, this game against Charlotte. I think there's been some debate for various reasons about the Pacers' worst loss of the season entering Sunday. That Philly home game was brutal. Absolutely should have had that one. In Charlotte, they scored 83. They looked terrible. The first Miami game, when they had just no effort, all these games stunk for various reasons. It's over to me. This was it. The Hornets did not have LaMelo Ball. They did not have Myles Bridges. They did not have Moussa Diabate. They did not have Grant Williams. I'm certainly missing players. They were down a ton of guys, and they won. They won. Isaiah Wong, Pacers last year on a two-way. Didn't even make it to league this year. Got cut by the Utah Jazz in training camp. He had 9 points in this game, was the Hornets' leading scorer off the bench. He evened Tyrese Haliburton and Pascal Siakam in points. What? What are we talking about? The Pacers are 10-15 now. This is some lazy math, but that's 25 games. Season's 82 long. If you triple 25 games, you get to 75. They'd be 30-45. That's terrible. I mean, that's just terrible. So, obviously, they're just bad. They're playing bad. They've been bad. They are bad right now. And we'll talk about the reasons they were bad in this particular game in a second. But this was the end of a stretch of games. And I actually extended it by 2, but I'm not going to tell you why until I talk about what just happened. This was the end of a stretch, if you remember, if you're an everyday listener, that I highlighted before the season started, of 12 games that I thought would probably define where the Pacers could land in the standings. Their first 13 were kind of hard, and they did not great, but okay. They went, I think, they won 6 games of their first 13, right? 6 and 7. Okay. That's not great. They weren't feeling good, but their next 12 are easy, right? The 12-game stretch the Pacers just went through: at Toronto, at Houston, at Milwaukee, versus Washington, versus New Orleans, versus Portland, at Memphis, at Toronto, at Brooklyn, at Chicago, versus Charlotte. They won 4 of those. They went 4-8. That was supposed to be the easy stretch. Granted, the Rockets were better and are better than I thought they would be before the season started. Every other game is about the team is about the same level most predicted. What just happened? How did they go 4-8 in that stretch? Now, the next two that got added to it because of their terrible NBA Cup results are Philly, who's been playing bad, but just got Joel Embiid back. They won their first game with Embiid playing of the entire season on Sunday. Maybe some momentum for the Sixers, who also have lots of time off before that game. And then they play a horribly banged up New Orleans team at home on Sunday. So in theory, that gets extended by 2 games. Congrats. If you win them both, you win 6 out of 14 against a crummy schedule. What is going on? The theory a lot of people had, I actually didn't subscribe to this that much, but I got why people did. Another theory a lot of people had for the Pacers being better than last year this year was last year they beat a ton of good teams and they lost to a ton of bad teams. And so some people said, well, they'll be more mature and they'll just win more of those games against the bad teams. I thought that was kind of silly because like they might also just lose more to the good teams. But instead they're losing more to the bad teams. They have 15 losses right now. Let me read through a few of those. Versus the Sixers at home, who did not have Paul George or Joel Embiid. They didn't crack 100 in regulation. In Charlotte, scoring 83 points against the Hornets. In Toronto, with no Scotty Barnes or Emmanuel Quickley. And I think they were missing another good player. I can't remember. Versus Detroit, who's okay. That's probably the best one I'll get through right now. At Toronto again, with no Quickley. At Brooklyn, and now versus Charlotte again. They're 10-15, and almost half their losses are just comically like not bad, not comically bad. Every NBA team can win. Like I am being a little harsh, but like the Pacers were favorites in every single one of those games, right? And they can't do it. They can't win these games. And the Hornets again got them in this game. The Pacers lost in the ways that just if you are a paying customer, just painful, right? Rebounding 45-29. If you guys have listened to the show for a while, you know I think of rebounding in a lesser way than most people do, but it was obviously a major difference in this game. It was huge. The Hornets got 7 more offensive rebounds and 5 more team rebounds. That's a major difference in a game where the Pacers did a lot of other stuff okay, right? That gave them a ton of extra chances. That's hustle. It wasn't just like the ball bounced to the Hornets. Like sometimes you can lose the rebounding battle because of bounces. Rick Carlisle said it. I don't have to say it. They said it. The Pacers said it. More than Rick Carlisle, but Carlisle goes first. Carlisle said it. I think they were trying harder about the Hornets on the glass than his team. What? You can't have that. JMV, who's on the show a week or 2 ago, he tweeted this. I'm paraphrasing because I'm not looking at it. 50-50 balls are not 50-50 with the Pacers. I think he said it feels like they lose 95% of them. I agree. I was joking with somebody earlier this season. I said we can't call them 50-50 balls with this team. We got to call them 80-20 balls. Well, really 20-80. Because they haven't hustled for them. This wasn't like the Heat game where it just felt like they weren't trying and were just, they had moments where things went well. In fact, I would say this, basically the whole game, what I felt like was when their offense was playing very well, they had stretches of that. Their defense was terrible. And when their defense was playing well, their offense couldn't get out of their way. So that's why this game looked the way it did. And we'll talk about it in more detail in the second segment. But no team was ever up more than 9. And that was like right away. The Hornets were up 9 in a pinch. And then the lead after that was basically 6 or less, but it was always the Hornets winning. The Pacers had a 2-point lead in the second quarter, had a couple 1-point leads. That's it, right? They couldn't go on a run because either when they were scoring enough to go on a run, they couldn't get stops. When they're getting stops to give themselves a chance to go on a run, they couldn't score. And it was so goofy to see. It did not matter who the lineups were. That flow continued for a whole game. You know why? You know what kind of teams have that problem? Bad teams, right? And it's so weird to just keep saying this stuff about this team that I thought would be good, that most people thought would be good, that internally I'm sure thought they would be good, that other teams in the league still talk about like a hard matchup that takes a lot of scouting and prep for, and then they lay eggs all the time for whatever reason or another. And this to me is their lowest point this year. This was their worst loss. I already said it. And this is their lowest point. And look, this sounds stupid to say, but how they react to it will tell us everything. Last year, when they beat lots of good teams, OKC twice, Boston twice, Dallas twice, Milwaukee 4 times, Miami twice, Cleveland twice. I don't need to run through it, but if you watch the Pacers last year, they won a lot of great games. And that was also a superpower of theirs, along with they would respond. Every time they lost a crummy game or lost a game it felt like they shouldn't, or they lost a game where their method of losing looked kind of flimsy or whimsy, they came out great the next game, right? Energy was there. Offensive firepower was there. That has not been a thing. Their energy and response has not been a thing this season. It has to be now. They have these 2 games I just mentioned, Philly and New Orleans. Then everybody knows, because I've talked about it. And this was another reason that this 12, now 14-game stretch from mid-November to mid-December is so important. Because after New Orleans at home next Sunday, the Pacers have 1 home game right now. You listen to this, between now and Christmas. They play at Phoenix, at Sacramento, at Golden State. Then they come home for OKC. So 3 tough road games. Then they come home for maybe the best team in the West. Then they go to Boston for 2. Then they host the Bucks. Then they go to Miami. Then they host the Suns. What? That's a very tough 9 games. Gets a little nicer after that. That's a very tough 9 games. If you want to isolate things, the last 7 of the month of December is Phoenix, Sacramento, Golden State, OKC, Boston, Milwaukee. They have they're 5 games under 500 right now. They have those 7 plus Philly, New Orleans. This team could be 10 games under 500 by the end of the month. Like, that's crazy. That is crazy. They have to right now get going. They have to respond. They have to show any level of consistency. And that, to me, is what has made this team kind of maddening. And I want to talk about that in the second segment, because that was the case in this game. They have moments of every single game where they look pretty good to great. Even in their most pathetic losses, they have a stretch where, like, yeah, there they go. There it is, right? And the fact that that happens but is not sustained or isn't carried game to game, in fact, it's been for 48 minutes once, maybe twice, it makes it so difficult to see what their solution is, and it makes it so difficult to think they can just suddenly turn it around. They've got to. They absolutely have to. I just spent 12 minutes talking about the Hornets game without actually talking about the Hornets game, but the Pacers are 10-15 with a bunch of bad losses, and this was their worst one. I don't know if this will be the low point of the season by record. In fact, it almost certainly won't be, but this might be their low point in terms of how a game feels in the context of their season, because now I think when this kind of game happens, especially after scoring 90 in Brooklyn last week and getting your pants pulled down by Toronto and all that, like after this, it just doesn't become that surprising anymore. Like any loss, right? That's what they're reaching. I've said this a lot. They're lucky the East is bad. They're lucky the East is bad this year, because that means they'll be close enough to cling to like some sort of game after the season. Well, they're currently tied for 11. And Philly's coming. Philly's actually playing better. 5-5 in their last 10 games. It's time. Unless the Nets and Bulls just pull the bottom out right now. Now it's time. The Pacers have to respond from this low point. And they've given no one reason to believe that they will. Their offense is not the same. Their defense still stinks. That's who they are. And that's what they were against Charlotte. Let's actually talk about the game and TJ McConnell, who deserves a second Locked On Pacers just for the way he played. All coming up here in the next segment. Before we get to any of that, though, we have to talk about Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets with Mint Mobile. You'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month, when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Say bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan. Bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal. Get 3 months of premium wireless access for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and get your 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. $45 upfront payment required. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speeds slower above 40 gigs on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day, or second listen, Locked On Hornets, who are going to be buzzing, pun intended, about a win with lots of players. Or maybe not. Maybe the Hornets don't want to win, but they did want to win this game, and they played very well. Charles Lee maybe just has the secret to slowing the Pacers and beating them with the Celtics last year. Now the Hornets this year. Just crazy to see a game like this. So what's maddening about the Pacers and what stood out in this game are two totally separate things. The maddening part I kind of already referenced is just how wildly inconsistent they are. In this particular game, their inconsistency was very obvious. Their starters were not good at all, and their bench was amazing. And that made it really hard to mix and match lineups and get the right groups out there. They wanted to be bench heavy, but the starters are in theory the guys you want to be out on the floor. It never came to fruition. Myles Turner was in foul trouble, didn't play great. But in general, that consistency game to game has been lacking. 132 a couple nights ago. Many of you are going to rush to the comments and say, hey, they shot the best percentage in the league from three that night, Tony. Of course they scored a bunch of points. Yeah, duh, making threes helps. I talked about this. If you watch the game, it was not just that. It was the points in the paint. It was the offensive process, attack, kick, drive, blur, screens, all the stuff they want to do very often, and they were doing it with pace. They did not do that today. They did tonight, last night, whenever you're listening. 36 threes, they made 12. Yeah, that's fine. Points in the paint, 40-something. They had 30 of those at halftime. Their offense really fell off in the second half. Really fell off. 62 first half points, 47 in the second half. They just disappeared a little bit on them. Hornets were hot from three, 14 for 29, almost half. They were really drilling them early. Vasai Micic was getting them down. Cody Martin was knocking them in. Daquan Jeffries was 2 for 3. Guys you don't expect to get crazy good. Brandon Miller shot well. Okay, that's fine. Isaiah Wong, ex-Pacer, made his only one. But, that's a big thing to overcome. So was the rebounding, just getting their butts kicked on the glass. Again, the Hornets did that to them last time, too. Hornets are a good rebounding team, but the gap should not be that wide, which is why the Hornets had 24 turnovers. 24. That's the second time in a week. The Raptors had this also, where the Pacers watching their team turn it over a ton, even more than them, and it doesn't matter. The Hornets had 24 turnovers and only took 4 less shots, and that's probably not even a good way to describe the shooting difference because they took 11 more free throws. I think a lot of fans, by the way, will be mad about how the challenges went in this game. There were some weird results to challenges. Irrelevant to the result to me. The Pacers played really bad. Obviously relevant. It was a 4-point game, but whatever. You get what I'm saying. The Hornets had more possessions despite having 24 turnovers. That's terrible rebounding. Pathetic rebounding. So the inconsistency is just wild. Where last game I'm saying, hey, look, there it is. There's the Pacers of last year. They need this to be a thing. They need to be consistent. I asked Rick Carlisle before the game, hey, how do you make sure the things you hammered home before last game happen again? Do you run through it again? Do you expect your leaders to go through it? He said, yes, they ran through those same points again before this game, and it did not translate this time. Did not translate. So the specifics of this Pacers team is just maddening inconsistency. The specifics to this game were all about the starters to me. The loss is all about starters. I ran through the games where they got the most points out of their quartet of stars. I believe it was when they beat New Orleans. It might have been Portland. I can't remember. During their homestand in late November when they were all good in the same game. One of their best games of – that was the best Haliburton Siakam game at the same time and all this stuff, right? That was great. They needed that to win. They got it. Tonight, I haven't run the numbers. I don't really care to because I watched the game, and I can just tell you objectively, probably the worst game they've gotten collectively from their best 4 players, or at least their top scorers this year. Haliburton, Turner, Siakam, and Mathurin. Your gross quartet today. They combined for 39 points, those 4 did. Ben Mathurin had a 38-point game by himself this season. Haliburton's gone over that by himself, right? Any trio, in fact, the top trio you could possibly get with scoring from those 4 players is Mathurin, Myles Turner, and either Siakam or Nembhard. You get to 30. TJ McConnell alone had 30. You just can't have that little production from your best players. You just can't. But that happened. They all struggled on the same night. And you can give the Hornets some credit. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. It was the Portland game, by the way, where they were all good at the same time. Josh Green defended very well. He was on Haliburton a lot of that. He's actually been a pretty good defender for them a lot of the season. He was +6. He played a good game. Siakam had some nice post shots early. They never went back to it. That's on the Pacers. Mathurin's been a little down recently. The 3 hasn't been falling. He wasn't crushing on the glass like he has been much of the season. Turner did not play well. He started terrible and then got into foul trouble. He picked it up with the 3s later in the game, but only 1 rebound. So some things I get, I guess. Josh Green's defense. Fouls certainly messed up Turner's game, although he wasn't playing well before them. But you can't have that little production from all four of those guys. 4 for 11 for Mathurin, 3 for 8 for Siakam, 3 for 9 for Turner, 4 for 10 for Haliburton. The best shooting percentage for one of those four was Haliburton at 40%. It's remarkable, and not in a good way. Andrew Nembhard played all 4 quarters, 31 minutes, 30 and a half. 3 for 5 from the field. He had 2 threes. He had 3 assists. He had 4 turnovers. He's got to clean those up. But he played fine. He played with the level they need or have hoped to get from him. Turnovers were a big problem for a lot of guys. But, Haliburton had 8 assists and only 2 turnovers. He had 3 blocks. He did some other good stuff. Siakam had 11 boards and 3 assists. They chipped in other ways, but when they got to finish the plays, they had to finish the plays, and they couldn't do it. And it totally cost them because the bench was awesome. McConnell was a huge part of it, but he was last year, and the bench was awesome too. Toppin had 11, most of it in the first half. Jarris Walker had a great game, podium game with 15 and some good defensive moments again, although his turnovers still head-scratching sometimes. Johnny Furphy just battles, even though he only played 9.5 minutes. Enrique Freeman came in because of Turner's foul trouble. He played 5 minutes. They went great. It made sense that they turned to him. That bench should have been enough, and it wasn't. It just wasn't. The starters and the best 4 players had to be better. They were not the best 4 players in the Pacers in this game. They were the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th best Pacers in this game. And they just lose when that happens. They just lose. And they could have got away with it if it weren't for you kids and your dog too. They could have got away with it because the bench was that good in this game. Amazing bench game. Amazing. And if just one of them was a tick better, they won this game 115-113. We never would have remembered how bad the quartet was. Instead, it's the story. It's everything. It's crazy. It's crazy where this team's at. They turned to Freeman again as the third 5/5/5th or 6th front court player. Moses Brown did not play, and the Hornets did play Taj Gibson 8 minutes and did play Nick Richards 25 minutes. They did play small a lot, but there were centers out there when Freeman came in. I think Moses Brown is not going to be a factor much this year if that's the decisions they are making. And what I also say, I think that's the correct decision that they are making, but that's just something else in my notes that I wanted to include here because the bench played pretty well. But there's not much important else to add. There's nothing to say about this game that hasn't been said a million times about them, except for TJ McConnell. TJ McConnell was terrific. TJ McConnell was leading and scoring and was the only reason the Pacers had a chance, and he closed the game. Let's talk about how he did it and a couple moments besides the scoring that really stood out to me. Before we do any of that, though, we got to talk about the great people over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. They are America's #1 sportsbook. NBA action, too, because right now, new customers can bet $5 on FanDuel and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all right in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, happens to everybody, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more. So you can be as informed as possible. Right on the same page where you place your bets. How about that? Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen should be Locked On Women's Basketball because the Golden State Valkyries had their expansion draft over the weekend, and Temi Fagbenle of the Fevers headed to Golden State. And if you're interested in that, you should be. Check that out. It's very fascinating what they did in that draft. Anyway, Pacers, NBA, TJ McConnell, best player on the floor by a lot tonight. Better than Brandon Miller, who, by the way, I should have included this from my notes from the last section. This says a lot about TJ McConnell and Brandon Miller and the state of the Pacers defense right now. The Pacers closed this game with McConnell. They should have. We'll get to that. They were putting TJ McConnell on Brandon Miller. That's like a 7-inch difference. And I was talking to somebody about it, and they were trying to mix it up. Jarris took the assignment sometimes, and Mathurin would. And as the possession went on, they were getting ready to switch. And on inbounds, it was different, whatever. It was clearly not just you guard you. But it happened multiple times that McConnell was on Brandon Miller, which says a lot about their options defensively and a lot about McConnell. That they were yeah, this is fine. TJ McConnell was unbelievable. He made 14 shots. That's a Pacers record off the bench tied. Al Harrington, I forget, someone else. Amazing, right? They could not stop. He missed 3 threes, which is what it is. I mean, on this kind of night, I can't nitpick too much. I would have taken 3 threes as him, but he made 3 threes and a half last year against the Bucks. He missed 1 shot from the top of the key in the free throw line. Basically, everything he took below the three free throw line, went in, except for 1 shot just outside the charge circle. He was on one tonight with the scoring, and it was basically all at the rim. That's what he does. The Hornets could not stay in front of him at all. And what they really wanted, or at least it felt like to me, the Pacers really wanted to get to were 2 guard, if not 3 guard lineups. In fact, Carlisle at one point turned to, he was just trying for answers as he should. He turned to Haliburton, Nembhard, McConnell, and Mathurin on the floor at the same time, right? They were trying to get that kind of pop going. And McConnell makes that all possible when he plays like this and plays this effectively and can punish defenses at will, basically, right? He could just fly into the lane and get to the basket for a layup or for that fadeaway he's been so good at, or that running towards the rim jumper fadeaway, but fading towards the basket. You know what I'm talking about. It's a goofy shot. It goes in. And it was working. And there was nothing that the Hornets could do about it all night. They put better defenders on him. Didn't matter. He just torched them all. 14 for 19. He didn't shoot enough. Like, that's only kind of tongue-in-cheek. 30 points. His first 30-point game. I mean, again, this would have been all about him. All about him. He did everything. He came in every time, changed the game. 6 assists, wasn't ball hogging it. 0 turnovers. 1 foul. 2 blocks and 2 steals. What more can you ask of a 6-foot-tall player? He was unbelievable. The Hornets had no answers. None. In some cases, it looked like they were willing to let him do it. He absolutely torched the Charlotte Hornets. Lineups when he was on the floor looked better. You know, their best high-minute lineup had McConnell and, of course, Siakam. That McConnell group with all the other guards played 4.5 minutes with Siakam at the 5. They won those minutes by 4. Like, they're just playing goofy or new units, and it worked. It just worked because he was that good in this game. So that's from a player perspective, what stood out to me is where and how often he got his attempts, right? He got below the free throw line every time. And this was not a game where he was doing a lot of that Steve Nash-y stuff where he acts like he's pulling it out and like whips his low center of gravity around and gets to the basket or any of those kind of tricks. He does do that like every game, but not as often tonight. It was literally just him like set up, cross, boom, boom, dribble, basket. Like he's there. And the Hornets rim protection was a big part of that. They had no one at the backside to stop him, but then he punished him because he would just get by him or get to a reverse or whatever. It was quite frankly unbelievable how easy he made it look to get to whatever spot he wanted. That obviously all stands out. He was their best player. Wasn't close. He was so good that it was early in the fourth quarter, and I can't remember how close it was, but we were talking on Media Row. I was like, I think they're probably going to pull this out. You know, it's a close game. They'll just find a run eventually. It was like 86-85, and Jarris had just hit a 3, and then McConnell scored 6 points in a row to make it a 2-point game with like 8.5 to go. And I said, they kind of need to pull him out of the game right now, not because he's not playing well. He's playing amazing, but because they need him to close. They absolutely have to have him on the floor to close this game. And I don't think they took him out. They just ran it the whole 8.5 with him out there. He came out with 10 seconds to go, whatever. They were down 3. They needed 3 points. Like, they had to do it. They had to close with him. He was that good. And they, instead of just going for that route, they just said, play the whole fourth quarter, right? He was that good. There were 2 other parts of this that stand out. 3, really. One's not so great, right? Last year, the bench was amazing. McConnell was this incredible leader. Guys followed suit by example a lot. And someone replied to me with this kind of general thinking. Shout out to Craig if you were listening. I love the Blue Sky people. About last year, how he was such an energy giver, right? When he would play like that and be just so effective in that way, everybody would follow suit. And, you know, last year they fed off the energy guy. This year they don't. They like take it for granted and walk through it. And it's not as contagious, right? And maybe that's just because they're losing and not making shots. It feels that way, but I'm watching the team. Their energy doesn't look as good on the court, even though it feels fairly similar off. It's remarkable the way that's gone down. So one thing is, if he's playing like that, others need to follow suit. He was unbelievable. 2 is 8:02 to go in the third quarter. Even though he wasn't in the game, he popped off the bench during free throws to talk to Tyrese Haliburton for a good amount of time, like during the game, pointing out stuff to him, right? I really wanted to know what that was about. Again, if they had won, I wish they could have, just so I could have asked about that conversation, how much that helped, how much that changed the game. What did that reveal or not reveal? That's the leader that TJ McConnell is, right? He's having a great game. Tyrese Haliburton is not. Pops up. Yep, I can do that. I can absolutely help him out. The other part of just who TJ McConnell is having 30 points in a loss, unfortunately, for him, and that made him mad. Like, it wasn't just like, yeah, 30 is cool. He said, when I asked him about the 30 and what he felt like about it, he said, I've got to find ways to make my teammates better and just be better in other areas. Obviously not worried about how many points I had. Just had a career high, just scored 30. That's what he said. I'm not surprised he took that road. He looked at the plus minus and said I was only +1, right? If he was +6, they win. +5, yeah. If he was +6, they win, right? That it's not on him, to be clear. That's just what he was thinking. So that's who he is, and that's how he plays, and that's how he played. And he said on the inconsistent play, he thinks the Pacers need to focus on the small details, especially on the defensive end. We just have to be better. Could not have said it better. They absolutely have to be better. They have to follow the energy giver. They really shouldn't need to. They should just have it, but they don't at all. And they're playing bad. They need energy. They need effort on the glass. They need to dive for loose balls. They need to make some shots with their best players. They need to play better. And guess what? You can only say that so many times before it doesn't mean anything. They're not very good right now. They don't play till Thursday. So this week will be Friday. Excuse me. They don't play till Friday. So this week on Locked On Pacers will be interesante. Tomorrow, Kalen Cooper in the house. We're talking some yucky basketball. We'll have lots to say, I'm sure. I also want to do a little trade deadline look ahead this week. I want to do a mailbag probably and have another guest on. So let me know if there's anyone you want to hear from or anything you want to hear on any of those topics. Do not submit mailbag questions yet. I'm not ready. I'm not certain I'm going to do one. We'll see, though. Very rare to have this big of a gap between games. Thank you all for listening today. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tony Tyrese. This podcast is on Twitter at Locked On Pacers. Thank you all for listening. Back tomorrow with Caitlin talking about why the Pacers aren't playing well. Till then, everybody have a wonderful day.